crypto is not going away for the skeptics that are out there. It's definitely here to stay. While the market, it does ebb and flow for sure. The technology at its core is here. Institutions are adopting this technology, and so it is important that anyone who's listening here should definitely try it out, test it out, learn more about it, read more about it. It is an opportunity for people to build.
We're seeing regulators overstepping right now or falling short at other times. Where we are right now, it's truly, truly not sustainable. And it makes our framework less competitive than other jurisdictions. And it also makes consumers go to unsafe access points because they can't have access to the assets that they want, or they can't do the cool stuff, their friends in Europe are doing. So we seriously need policy leadership and to create new legislation and regulations. And we need everybody at the table for that. We need regulators, policymakers, and the industry for that. Because what we have right now, it's just not sustainable.
I'm Sasha Krstic, president of Mastercard Canada and host of Future Forward on TheFutureEconomy.ca. Over the past few years, cryptocurrency has become increasingly popular, with many people investing in Bitcoin, Ether, and other digital currencies. Whatever your opinion on cryptocurrency, the fact remains that these digital assets are becoming a more important part of our digital world. Despite some concerns about the volatility and potential risks regarding its value, many see cryptocurrency as a promising investment opportunity. Its role in the digital economy is expected to grow in the coming years. Today, I'm joined by Morva Rohani, Executive Director of the Web3 Council, and Eric Richmond, President of Coinsquare, which is owned by WonderFi, a TSX company, and co-founder and director of Tetra Trust Company, Canada's only trust company licensed to custody digital assets. Together, we'll explore the rise of cryptocurrency and what are some of the implications for Canadians, identify calls to action for industry, government, and key stakeholders across Canada on what must be done now and by who to improve wider adoption of digital assets and their role in the future economy. Let's get to it. In the past few years, many people have either bought, traded, or simply read about cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And our research from Mastercard in our 2022 New Payments Index found that in North America, 34% of consumers have or would consider buying cryptocurrency. I'm curious about blockchain as the transformative technology under cryptocurrencies. What are some of those social and economic benefits you see this bringing to Canadians?
I think around 3% of Canadians, or close to 1 million, are actually unbanked and 15% are underbanked. So just building on top of that, I think efficiencies in payments and creating access to financial services is definitely an area where there's a lot of opportunity, because cryptocurrencies allow for low cost, nearly instantaneous, borderless peer-to-peer transfers of actual value. And so this opens up, extraordinary opportunities for innovations in payments. So there's an opportunity to provide Canadian consumers with more choices and options on how and when they can pay for something. And this is all borderless. So it allows Canadians to access the global digital economy, because the digital economy is global and it's not just limited to Canada. And it could mean we could find better and easier ways to transact while gaming online or shopping online, or especially for businesses who are looking for new revenues online.
So at its core, blockchain is distributed ledger technology. Now, what does that really mean, right? If you think about sending funds from one party to another within, or let's start with, if you send funds within your bank from one bank account to another, that's essentially a database change. Right? It's simple, it's quick. You go from your checking to your savings, it's easy. Now, if you go from one party, from your CIBC bank account to, an RBC bank account as an example, right? That takes a little bit of time. You got to use maybe Interac rails, you got to use an EFT rail, right? There are intermediaries now that are involved in that sort of transfer, right? And then you go, now broaden that even more. You want to send a wire transfer overseas, right? You're not just using, RBC's rails. You're going to use maybe Bank of America, or maybe, and there's multiple intermediaries that are sort of in that system complex to send that wire. It gets more and more complex, right? At the end of the day, go back to the transfer that was really easy, going from my checking account to my savings account, right? Because all that really is a database change. That's what crypto really enables, right? At the end of the day, because it is a distributed technology. There's a ledger of debits and credits that everyone can see. And so the ease of use of sending funds from one party to another is fairly seamless. And you don't need to rely on these intermediaries. So you're disintermediating, you're removing intermediaries. So there's less cost involved, less time. It's a lot quicker. At one point, Bitcoin, or ETH at one point was expensive to transfer, but even that has been there's things called layer twos or other sort of, protocols that are in existence today that make the transfer fees, essentially less than a penny, right? Where it's essentially free to transfer from one account to another. And so that at its core is really powerful and really unique. And then just pivoting to one other thing, there's also the one thing we haven't really talked about is like smart contracts, which I'm sure is something people have heard about a ton, which is basically executable code that, works on specific instructions that you provide it. But what's really unique and powerful about that is that you can start then creating these platforms and then remove the intermediaries from many different types of projects.
Given both your roles and your passion about crypto and blockchain, I'm not surprised to hear you talk about the social and economic benefits, but I'd be interested in hearing the flip side. What are some of the skepticisms that you encounter or that you hear people talking about when you're engaging in conversations?
There has been a bit of a focus on speculative investments and assets in this space, right? Especially in the media and in this economic climate when financial pressures are high on Canadians. It's easy to have anxiety over assets and investments that could be perceived to be more risky. But crypto certainly has speculative aspects to it, but it's not random speculation or purely speculative. Crypto is often underpinned by innovative work and worthwhile projects that people are investing into. And certainly the high profile cases of fraud in the space definitely doesn't help. And we've even had public pension plans invest in some of these companies. So if I were to put myself in the shoes of some of the Canadians, I too would be skeptical, but emerging technologies and assets have that double scrutiny because they're new. And most in the industry are credible, regulated, and legitimate businesses who are continuing to build the future of this ecosystem in this market. And they want to contribute to the building blocks of a digital economy. So to address the skepticism, I think Canadians need that reassurance that regulations in this space are adequate and they're working. And this is what we're working on at the council.
Eric, anything to add?
Well, what's unique about crypto is because everything's on chain. I think this is one of the reasons like Mastercard owns a blockchain analytics firm is they can actually trace the blockchain. You can actually understand where these funds are going. And so there are some very unique tools now where basically crypto is a terrible way to launder money if you want to launder money at this point, because you can really just trace that. And so both from like any early asset class or any area, there are people who are trying to exploit it, but I do think we're sort of on the ups now of regulating the space, ensuring that the bad actors can't do what they do. They will always exist, but it's having the tools in place to ensure we can prevent that activity.
I want to pick up on that because in a previous episode of Future Forward, where we were talking about privacy, there was a lot of discussion around the importance of safeguards and the role that regulators play in developing those. Morva, maybe I'll start with you. What role should regulators play to secure Canadians? And what are the opportunities for growth? And do you see that happening, or do you have any recommendations on what should be done differently from a regulatory perspective?
I definitely have a lot of recommendations on what could be done.
Bring them on.
The regulators in Canada have done a good job in securing Canadians and providing a consumer protection framework for crypto. We're actually ahead of some other jurisdictions in that we already have a regulatory framework for crypto trading platforms. We have an AML regime. And this is because we had our own homegrown FTX, we had Quadriga, and regulators needed to respond to that years ago. But the role of regulators now is different. Like the opportunity for growth is for regulators to work with lawmakers to evolve their approach and balance consumer protection with the innovation and the growth that's necessary and urgently needed in this industry. So Canadian policymakers and regulators, in my opinion, seem to be trying to contain this industry right now instead of balancing consumer protection measures with encouraging the growth of this sector. But we have legitimate players in the space looking to build and grow, and it's the government's responsibility to address the growth challenges of this sector. We desperately need policy leadership in this space right now from the federal government because we're seeing regulators regulators right now overstep their boundaries and basically engage in policymaking because there's a lack of involvement from the federal government. Recently, provincial securities regulators took some action that effectively banned stablecoins from being listed on crypto trading platforms. And that's an area where we urgently need the federal government to step in and provide a regulatory framework because it falls within their jurisdiction. We're in phase 1 right now. We need to go to phase 2, or just the next phase of it in general. And we need to decide what is our purpose, what is our overall approach that we want to take here. Do we want to just contain the space, or do we want to enhance consumer protection, have fair competition, and provide choices to Canadians? And that's a very policy oriented discussion that goes beyond what regulators can do, and I really think it's desperately needed.
An important distinction between regulators and policymakers. So thank you for giving examples of both. Eric, anything that you'd add on that one?
Yeah, I think the only thing to add is, and I completely agree with Morva's comments, is in sort of for policymakers, is consultation. That's critically important. Consulting with the industry, consulting with people who are dealing with this every day, and there has been a lot of that, but it's ensuring that informs their policy making. I think is really critical.
According to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, Canadians reported losses of over $300 million related to investment fraud in 2022, compared to $164 million in 2021. So a pretty big difference year over year. Of those reports, many involve Canadians using and investing in cryptocurrency. So I'd be interested in your opinion on how big of an obstacle is crypto scam for widespread currency adoption? Big issue, or a very small portion of other things that we should be looking at?
We do have the tools available to us to combat a lot of this today. That is continually evolving for the better. Banks and payment providers, exchanges, they've all sort of adopted this technology, and I guess most importantly, law enforcement has adopted this technology, and they're using it to their advantage, right? They're using it to combat this fraud. At the end of the day, you talk to any security expert, right? They'll tell you that you can't protect someone from themselves. Like, there's only so much you can do to protect someone from themselves. It's no different than, as an example, like I'm sure, most people who are listening, at any of their corporations, they get trained on security training, and it's typically phishing, right? And it's like, what to look out for? What are the common markers to look out for in these phishing sort of events? And it's sort of the same thing in crypto. I mean, it's similar markers, to be honest, but also, like, if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true, right? There's not these promotions or things where you're sending money to something because you can get a 100x return, right? If it sounds too good, it probably is too good, and it's probably a scam. And so it's just that getting out that messaging is really important and critical to protect people from themselves.
Crypto scams are not unique. There's, fraud and scams in other parts of the financial sector. And so the education needs to be the same. But when it comes to, bigger risk, and I really do think the biggest risk when it comes to in this space is unregulated platforms and future FTXs. And that's where the government really needs to step in. That's where the education from the government needs to come in to not only create the adequate regulatory environment so that the winners that we're picking are the ones who are legitimate and regulated, but to also educate the public on which access points are safe and which ones are not. And I think that's something that's probably a bit unique to this space, but generally, I think when it comes to education efforts, we can't treat these instances of fraud or scams in this space like they're novel. It's just like any other. But like Eric mentioned, it's actually easier to trace it and easier to mitigate and manage it.
Morva, you've talked a lot about the future. And so I'm curious for your views on how do you see the crypto landscape evolving in the coming years, and what can Canadian individuals and organizations do to prepare for these changes, or what should they be embracing about these changes?
I think the average person doesn't really understand, and they find crypto very scary and too complicated. So I think what we can expect and what the ecosystem really needs to do in the next few years is to build more user-friendly products and to find better product market fit for the things that they're putting out there, so that crypto isn't this scary thing that nobody understands, that's just full of scams and fraud, but it's actually, people understand the value prop that it is making it easier for them to transact, or that it is providing efficiencies or cost savings for them. When we see that, we'll probably see more adoption of these products and services to a broader audience. On the regulatory side, I think we can see more consolidation in this space. So there are various regulatory frameworks that are going to come into force in the next few years, one being MiCA in the European Union. And we'll see more firms being registered and going through the process in Canada, for instance. So what that means is that legitimate players will come out as winners, and those who can't or won't comply, they won't be able to survive. So we'll see that consolidation. And then the last thing I'll say is we can continue to expect more regulatory uncertainty in the next few years. So, and it'll continue to heat up, and it'll continue to impact market conditions because in some jurisdictions like the US, there are a lot of regulatory issues that are being battled out in court because the SEC has decided to do regulation via enforcement. And that will have a lot of implications for how the landscape will evolve in the next few years because of the importance of that market to the global digital economy. And when it comes to organizations and businesses, I think monitoring the regulatory developments is probably the most important thing that, every business in this space or every business interested in becoming involved in this space should be doing. Investing in policy and advocacy efforts like we're doing at the council is going to be the best investment in the next few years, because these are really the defining years for how this space will be regulated. And it's always a chicken and egg question, like what comes first, mass market adoption or good regulation? And I think it's a bit of both. And we really can't ignore that regulatory piece when it comes to that. There's a lot of issues that need to be ironed out with our regulatory framework, and they need to work better with industry to address those issues. But where we are right now, it's truly, truly not sustainable. And it creates risks for consumers and businesses in this space. And it makes our framework less competitive than other jurisdictions. And it also makes consumers go to unsafe access points because they can't have access to the assets that they want, or they can't do the cool stuff, their friends in Europe are doing. So my call to action to regulators is that they need to acknowledge that there are areas in this space that don't fit into existing regulations, that we sometimes need bespoke regimes when it comes to this space. And we seriously need policy leadership and to create new legislation and regulations. And that's the only way for us to get to the next phase here. And we need everybody at the table for that. We need regulators, policymakers, and the industry for that. Because what we have right now, it's just not sustainable.
Very clear call to action. Eric, over to you. We live in an increasingly digital world. Our economy is increasingly digital. What's the one piece of advice you would give to consumers and businesses to either ensure that they're ready or to be willing to embrace our increasingly digital world?
Yeah, no, I think it's important for everyone to just understand what crypto really means. Play with it. That's always the best way to learn really anything. Just deposit a little bit of money, start trading with it, start sending it to different people, and then see what the technology really provides. That's the best way to really learn, understand the value that this can provide. That's really what if I go back to 2016, 2015 when I got into the space, that's what really opened my eyes. What's unique about crypto we haven't really talked about is that, anyone can really be their own bank. That's really powerful to some people. If you wanted to, you could, you can hold your entire net worth pretty much in your hand. Crypto is not going away for the skeptics that are out there. It's definitely here to stay. The market, it does ebb and flow for sure. The technology at its core is here. Institutions are adopting this technology. They're investing in Bitcoin and other crypto, but also the technology itself, and how they can basically make themselves more efficient, how they can improve what they do on a day-to-day basis. And so it is important that, anyone who's listening here should definitely, try it out, test it out, learn more about it, read more about it, because it won't be going anywhere. It will ebb and flow, and we're still in this sort of especially in these I'll say slower times, but the market over the last few days has started to move in a sort of upward trajectory. But it is an opportunity for people to build.
Eric, Morva, thank you for the insightful discussion today. Crypto and blockchain can be a complex topic, but I'm grateful for your insights and confident that we have a clear understanding of the technology and its role in the future of our digital economy. My 3 takeaways are: 1, the importance of education and the responsibility of education; 2, understanding that blockchain can be a pathway to simplicity, efficiency, and transparency; and 3, probably most importantly, that in order to see this scale, we need to find the balance between consumer protection and innovation. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you to our audience for tuning into the Future Forward series hosted by me, Sasha Krstic, President of Mastercard Canada. I hope you're enjoying our conversations with Canadian thought leaders and industry experts on the forces and trends shaping Canada's future economy and what we need to do to stay at the forefront. I'd love to hear from you, so let us know your thoughts on the topics we discussed today in the comments section below. And to be notified of the next releases in the series, subscribe to this channel and the TheFutureEconomy.ca newsletter and social. Links are in the description. I'm Sasha Krstic. Thanks for joining me, and see you next time.